Okay, so ready to dive into another deep dive.
Yeah, let's do it.
Today, we're tackling Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos.
Ah, Theranos.
It's a story that I think really everyone remembers.
Yeah.
Huge.
Huge scandal.
Exactly.
Silicon Valley.
So we've got a ton of articles, legal documents even. And, what we really want to figure out is, was she a visionary?
Oh, yeah.
Was she a con artist?
Right. Grifter or gifted?
Yeah, was she a grifter or was she gifted?
That is the question.
So let's start at the beginning. 2003. Elizabeth Holmes founds Theranos, right?
Yep, 2003.
And she's promising to revolutionize blood testing.
I mean, it's a bold claim, right?
Right.
Hundreds of diseases
Yeah.
from a single drop of blood.
And it's not just, the science.
Yeah.
She's also becoming a media darling.
Oh, yeah. Magazine covers.
All over the place.
Like comparisons to Steve Jobs.
Yeah, the black turtleneck even.
Like she was cultivating that image.
Oh, for sure. It was very calculated.
Oh, yeah.
And it worked.
It did. I mean,
Big time.
investors were just throwing money at her.
Rupert Murdoch, the Walton family.
Henry Kissinger.
Henry Kissinger, come on.
It's crazy.
And it's because she's so compelling. She's talking about democratizing healthcare, making it accessible to everybody, affordable.
Really resonating with people.
Especially, I think, people who had had bad experiences
Oh, totally.
with traditional blood testing.
Right. Long wait times, the big needles.
Exactly.
So she's tapping into something real.
So then, 2015,
Oh.
Forbes names her the youngest self-made female billionaire
$4.5 billion.
in America. $4.5 billion. Theranos is valued at $9 billion.
It's insane.
It's insane. But
Yeah.
then, that same year, the cracks start to show.
Right. The Wall Street Journal starts publishing these investigations.
Yeah.
Questioning the validity of the technology.
Are the tests accurate?
Right. And are they really using their own technology?
Right, they had this device, the Edison.
The Edison.
Yeah,
Supposed
right.
to be revolutionary.
And it turns out,
Not so much. Turns out they were relying on, commercially available devices.
really?
Yeah, and the Edison. Often inaccurate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big bombshell.
It was a huge bombshell, and this is what triggers the cascade, right?
Yep, the lawsuits start coming in.
Walgreens, they partnered with Theranos to offer these tests in their stores.
Right.
They're suing
The SEC is investigating.
the state of Arizona.
Everyone's getting involved.
It is clear that the promise was not matching reality.
Not even close.
And then, 2018, things get really serious.
Yeah, criminal charges.
The U.S. Justice Department charges Holmes and her former business partner, and I think it's important to note, lover, Ramesh Sunny Balwani,
Yeah, Sonny Balwani.
multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy.
It's a big shift, right?
huge.
We go from a business failure to
Yeah.
potential criminal wrongdoing.
Yeah. It's not just, oh, the business failed. It's people could have been hurt.
Right.
So the trials are highly publicized, as you can imagine. Balwani's is first.
2022. Convicted. All 12 felony counts of fraud and conspiracy.
In the sentence.
Almost 13 years. He starts serving it in April of 2023,
Wow.
and he's scheduled for release in November 2033.
So, a real consequence.
Yeah, this is serious.
Yeah.
Then comes Holmes's trial. Also, 2022.
Guilty.
4 counts of defrauding investors, 3 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud.
What?
But she's found not guilty on 4 counts of defrauding patients.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. What do you think that means?
Maybe the jury felt like with the investors there was intent to deceive for financial gain, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But with the patients, maybe they weren't sure.
Yeah.
Maybe they thought it was more like recklessness or something. Who
Yeah.
knows? But it's a distinction.
It is a distinction.
Yeah.
So November 2022, Holmes is sentenced.
11 and a quarter years.
11 and a quarter years in prison. She's ordered to pay $452 million to the victims. And she surrenders on April 27th, 2023, to begin serving her sentence at federal prison camp Bryan in Texas.
Okay, so prison.
Prison. Minimum security facility, specifically designed for women. But even though they were both convicted, both Holmes and Balwani are actually on track for a little bit of an early release.
Oh, really? Why? Good behavior.
Good behavior, yeah.
Oh.
Balwani's projected relief date is now April 1st, 2034, and Holmes's is May 2032.
Huh.
So let's talk about, I think one of the most interesting parts of this whole story is Elizabeth Holmes's image.
Oh, yeah,
It's
totally.
like a character almost.
The Steve Jobs thing, the black turtleneck.
The deep voice.
Was it all an act?
I mean, even a Spanish newspaper, El País, they were comparing her to, actors,
Actors.
like Austin Butler.
Oh, the Elvis guy.
Right, and how he, like, couldn't shake the deep voice after filming.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
It's crazy how you can, like, embody a whole.
Right, and it changes you.
Yeah.
So was she doing that? Was it all, like, calculated?
Right. The Cut even published an article back in 2019. It was called "What Type of Person Fakes Their Voice?"
Oh, wow.
And it was all about the psychology behind vocal manipulation
Interesting.
and how, like, lower, deeper voices are perceived as more authoritative, especially for men.
Makes you wonder if she was doing that on purpose.
Right, to get ahead in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the voice.
Oh, yeah.
The New Yorker said that she even wore the black turtleneck
Oh, wow.
to cultivate a specific image,
Like a uniform.
like a uniform.
Huh.
So was it all an act? Was she a master manipulator from the very beginning?
I mean, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, and to answer that, we really have to look beyond the surface. Like, what did she actually do?
Right. The evidence.
The evidence, the choices she made.
The impact.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so we've talked about the image, the persona, but what about the actual technology?
Right, did it actually work?
Well, we know the claims were exaggerated, but there's something kind of interesting happening now with blood tests that makes you think.
You mean that new blood test? The one that can predict diseases like years in advance.
Yeah, exactly. Researchers are working on this test that could potentially detect cancer, heart disease, even things like anxiety disorders.
Like, really?
Yeah, and like a decade before symptoms show up.
That sounds crazy. I mean, after Theranos, how can we even believe that?
I know, right? It sounds almost too good to be true. But this research is actually pretty solid.
This is legit.
Yeah, it was published in Nature Medicine.
Okay, that's a good sign.
Yeah, and it's based on data from the UK Biobank Pharma Proteomics project.
So tell me more about the science behind it. How does it even work?
Basically, they analyzed blood samples and health records from over 40,000 people in the UK.
That's a lot of data.
Right. And they found these specific proteins in the blood that are like early warning signs for different diseases.
Like biomarkers.
Exactly, biomarkers. And they've built these models that can predict the likelihood of you developing any of 67 different diseases.
67.
Yeah, over a 10-year period.
That's incredible. So, like, you could know if you're at risk for something years before it even happens.
Exactly. And for a lot of these diseases, this model is way more accurate than the tests we have now.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, for multiple myeloma, a type of bone cancer, they could identify people likely to develop it, like 10 years before traditional methods.
Wow. I mean, early detection is so important.
Right. It could completely change how we approach healthcare.
More preventative, less reactive.
Exactly. But, it's hard not to think about Theranos, right?
Yeah, I mean, are we just setting ourselves up for another disappointment?
I think the difference here is transparency. This research has been peer-reviewed. It's all out in the open. There's no hiding the data, no secret technology.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
Me too. But, we still need to be cautious.
Yeah, of course.
Thorough clinical trials are crucial. We don't want to repeat history.
No, we've learned that lesson the hard way. Hype doesn't equal results.
Right. But it is kind of ironic, isn't it?
What is?
This new blood test, it's like the fulfillment of the promise that Theranos made.
It is, yeah. It's like science is catching up to the deception.
Exactly. But this time, it's real.
And hopefully ethical.
Yeah.
Speaking of ethical, let's get back to Elizabeth Holmes for a minute.
Yeah, okay.
We were talking about her voice
Yeah.
and how she might have used it to, like, project authority.
Right.
I was reading about the different prison facilities.
Uh-huh.
Holmes is at federal prison camp, Brian, in Texas.
Okay.
It's a minimum security facility designed for women.
Interesting. So even in prison, there are different levels of, like, security and comfort.
Yeah, and Balwani is at a federal prison in Southern California. He's scheduled for release in November 2033. So do you think those sentences are, like, fair?
That's a tough question.
I mean, on the one hand, these were not dumb people.
Right.
Highly educated, well-connected. They knew what they were doing.
And they hurt a lot of people.
Financially, for sure. But also, like, the whole idea of trusting the healthcare system, trusting tech companies.
Yeah, there was a bigger impact beyond just the money.
Exactly. But then there's also this whole idea that white-collar crime is treated differently.
Right. Like if they were, I don't know, robbing banks, would they be getting out early for good behavior?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue.
It is. But it makes you think about fairness and privilege and all of that.
For sure. Okay, let's move on to another interesting part of this whole story. Elizabeth Holmes's insistence that she was innocent.
Oh, yeah, she never admitted any wrongdoing.
Even after being convicted, she maintained that she didn't intend to deceive anyone, and she even claimed that Balwani abused and controlled her.
Really? Both in the relationship and in the business.
Yeah. So, like, was she a victim? Or was she a mastermind?
That's hard to say.
I mean, she spent 7 days on the witness stand.
Oh.
Admitted to making mistakes, sure, but absolutely denied any criminal intent.
I mean, that's a classic defense strategy.
Right. I messed up, but I didn't mean to break the law.
Exactly. Take responsibility for the little things, but deflect the big stuff.
And even though she tried to appeal her conviction and her sentence, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals rejected those appeals in December of 2024.
So, legally, it's over.
It's over. But I think the debate about Elizabeth Holmes, her motivations, what she really did, it's going to go on for a while.
Yeah, for sure. It's a story that just keeps people talking.
It really does. It makes you think about ambition, about storytelling, about what we choose to believe.
And how easy it is to get caught up in it all.
Exactly. And I think it's a cautionary tale for everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Whether you're an investor, an entrepreneur, anyone really.
Anyone who's trying to figure out, like, what's real and what's not.
Exactly. Because sometimes the most charming, the most persuasive people are the ones you need to watch out for.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, it's amazing how this story, it just stays with you.
It really does. And I think it's because it gets at something we all wonder about.
What's that?
Like, how do we tell the difference between someone who is really trying to change the world
Right.
and someone who's, just out for themselves?
Especially when there's so much hype,
Yeah,
so much charisma. It's easy to get swept up in that.
exactly.
Yeah?
And I think that's one of the biggest lessons from Elizabeth Holmes, from Theranos.
What's
I
that?
can't just take people at their word,
No.
no matter how impressive they seem.
Their background, their vision.
Right, you have to think critically,
Question everything.
ask tough questions.
Demand proof.
And that goes for everything, not just tech.
Right. Politics, investments, even like personal relationships.
Yeah, sometimes the most charming
The
people
most convincing.
are the ones you really got to watch out for.
So where does that leave us? What can we learn from all this?
Well, I think due diligence is key.
Yeah, like don't just trust blindly.
Right, do your research. Talk to experts.
Look at the evidence.
If something sounds too good to be true,
It probably is.
it probably is. And with Theranos, it definitely was. The technology just didn't exist.
And yet she convinced so many people.
It's the power of belief,
Right. People wanted to believe her.
They wanted this vision of the future, this better healthcare.
That's why we have to be skeptical.
Yeah, challenge assumptions, challenge authority,
Demand transparency.
especially when it comes to something as important as our health.
Absolutely. Theranos, it's a wake-up call.
Yeah, be a smarter consumer of information.
Hold people accountable.
It's on all of us to make sure that innovation
Progress.
happens.
Responsibly.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it. This has been a fascinating deep dive
It has.
into a story that, honestly, I think we'll be talking about for years to come.
I think so too. And hopefully people will take something away from it.
Yeah, like how to think critically,
Be skeptical.
demand evidence.
Hold people in power accountable.
Exactly. So, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the lives and legacies of today's most fascinating
Controversial.
and controversial figures